Greetings, sisters, and welcome to Wonder Woman, Warrior for Peace. My name's Angela, and this is episode 4. Okay, just one thing to go over before we start this episode. I have decided that for the YouTube versions of the podcast to remove the intro music. I keep hearing stories about how YouTube is getting more and more aggressive with their copyright claims, and since the point of the YouTube channel is to be a backup in case the main ever goes down, I don't want to give them a reason to put a strike on the channel. For the outro music, I have explicit permission from the double clicks to use it, and I have permission from Tasdamian Devil as well, but since his song is a remix, the only ones that will have the intro music are episodes 1 and 2, unless a claim is filed and they have to get taken down. I'll just re-upload them without the music. If you are listening to this on YouTube, the link to Tasdamian Devil's awesome remix is in the description below. Go check it out, because it is amazing. One of my ultimate goals of this show is to one day produce an episode worthy of that song. Okay, starting off, we have Sensation Comics Volume 1, Issue 3, Wonder Woman, A Spy in the Office. Cover date is March 1942. Writer was Charles Moulton, who we know is actually William Moulton Marsden, and the art was Harry G. Peter, and I'm reading this from Wonder Woman Archives Volume 1. We start with Nurse Diana Prince crying that Steve Trevor is finally recovered and she will never see him again. Steve says he'll do anything to show his gratitude, so she asks if she can be his secretary. He already has a secretary, but his commanding officer, Colonel Darnell, does need a new office assistant. Steve arranges an interview, and despite the Colonel purposefully dictating too fast, Diana is able to write what he's saying and type it at lightning speed due to the fact that women on Paradise Island are trained to have perfect memories, so she gets the job. Diana meets Steve's secretary, Lila Brown, who is suspicious of her new co-worker because she says she cheated in the interview by using what Diana calls Amazonian shorthand. When Diana's nurse training is put to use collecting health reports on the office's women, Lila is resentful, until during her checkup when a messenger tells Miss Brown that a man asking to see her wants that envelope. Lila says she doesn't have it, but Diana, who's taking her blood pressure at the time, sees her blood pressure jump and concludes that the secretary feels guilty about the envelope. Diana finds the letter in the patient's clothes, and after subduing an angry Lila with a knockout punch, discovers that it's a message from someone codenamed X-46 to another spy telling the train route that Captain Trevor will take while carrying a secret military formula. A reawakened Lila insists she just found the envelope, and promises to explain everything to Diana after work but before Steve leaves. Diana agrees, but the captain takes an earlier train, and an anonymous tip tells Colonel Darnell that spies are planning to intercept him. The woman on the phone also claimed that the colonel's secretary is also a spy, and is carrying a secret message, so Diana is searched and the letter from X-46 is found. Diana is put under arrest, but her rank as a nurse means she's confined to her quarters, which allows her to change into her Wonder Woman costume and escape through the window. She then abducts Miss Brown and takes her to a secluded park bench, demanding answers. Lila tells her that she's not a spy, but her younger sister Eve fell in love with a man named Gross, who turned out to be the Nazi agent X-46. Not realizing this, Eve unintentionally gave him secret information, and he used it to blackmail her into spying for him and delivering his message. Lila found and took the letter, refusing to give it back. The two women then race to Gross's speedboat, where Wonder Woman persuades him to talk by dunking him in the Potomac. He says the plan changed after his message was intercepted. Eve is on the train with Captain Trevor and will lead him into a trap in Baltimore, where Gross's men will take the secret formula and meet him on a yacht in the Chesapeake Bay. Wonder Woman sends a mental radio signal to Holiday College, where we see Etta Candy showing off something that looks like an alarm clock that the family from My Big Fat Greek Wedding would own. A white dome with a radio dial on it, supported by Greek columns and a wire running to a replica of Wonder Woman's headband. It's the brainwave radio Wonder Woman gave her so she can contact Etta whenever she needs. With it, Wonder Woman tells Etta to take some girls with her to intercept Captain Trevor and Eve in Baltimore and capture the spy. They arrive just in time to catch Eve, who has already led Trevor to the Nazis and then run off with the dropped formula. claiming to passers-by that they're hazing the woman as part of her initiation into the Beta Lambda Society. Meanwhile, the Nazis have taken Steve to their yacht and are slowly lowering a massive anchor onto his chest in an attempt to get him to talk. Wonder Woman arrives in the nick of time, taking out the spies and rescuing Steve before he's crushed to death. She, Steve, and Lila then head to Holiday College, where they find Etta and her friends still initiating Eve. Wonder Woman yells for them to stop, and Eve gives the captain back the secret formula, saying she loves her country but was scared and didn't realize what she was doing. Back at the Army Intelligence Office, Colonel Darnell apologizes to Diana Prince for arresting her and asks what he can do to make it up. She recommends that Eve be released and allowed to attend Holiday College, where she can get an education. Once again, everyone congratulates Steve on stopping the spies. Darnell specifically says he must be a Superman, while Steve insists it was all Wonder Woman's doing. And once again, Diana Prince muses on the irony that Steve is too busy talking about Wonder Woman to notice her. So, we seem to be moving to a new status quo with this issue. I mean, Captain Trevor couldn't stay in the hospital forever, but it does seem a little silly that his nurse would beg to be secretary at his office. I find it funny how the Colonel was really patronizing and looked down on Diana when she went in for her interview, but she completely blew him out of the water using her Amazonian shorthand, which sorta, kind of ish looks like Greek letters. It's hard to tell with the rough style of the artwork. She claims to him that she wants to be a secretary because as a nurse she's been reassigned to surgery and she can't stand the sight of blood. Yeah, right. And the guy completely buys it. He's like, oh, poor little girl. Seriously, dude. I mean, even in the 40s you couldn't go through nurses training if you had hemophobia. I don't know if the character of Steve's secretary Lila is going to be recurring or not. It'd be cool if she was less antagonistic towards Diana, and the two became friends as the series went on. I gotta admit, the plot on this one was a little complicated, with the passing the letter back and forth and suspecting everyone of being a spy. Most Golden Age stuff is usually got a really basic plot, but this one had some twists and turns. That was cool. I should mention that Wonder Woman's costume is changing a little bit. The legs of her culottes are getting less and less skirt-like and becoming more like a loose pair of shorts. Etta is starting to grow on me. She, when the guy questions what they're doing to Eve, she kind of bribes him with candy, which is pretty funny. It was really cool at the end how instead of getting locked up forever or being angry at her, Diana recommended that Eve go to the college and get an education. I don't know how common higher learning for women was in that era, but that was really neat. Despite some of the silliness, I like this comic, so let's give it 3 stars. Okay, moving on, we're doing Wonder Woman Volume 2, Issue 4, A Long Day's Journey into Fright. Cover date was May 1987. George Perez was the plotter and penciler. Len Wein was the scripter. Bruce D. Patterson was the inker. John Costanza was letterer. Tatiana Wood was colorist. And Karen Berger was the editor. Picking up right where the last issue left off, Diana scoops up Julia and Vanessa Capitelis and carries them out of the house as decay causes it to crumble around them. The neighbors look on in horror as Diana sets the women down. Julia is unhurt, but her teenage daughter is wrinkled with age. Decay, standing in the rubble that used to be the Capitelis' home, holds Wonder Woman's tiara aloft and says that she has what she came for. She flies off, daring the princess to follow her. Diana promises to return with a cure for Vanessa, then sheds the button-up shirt she was wearing over her costume and takes off in pursuit. We see Julia's neighbors helping her take her daughter to the hospital as Diana searches the city for the disappeared monster. On Mount Olympus, which for some reason now looks like M.C. Escher's Relativity with some of the Olympians standing on the walls, The gods watch Wonder Woman. They'd like to intervene, but apparently it's been decreed that mortals will have to be saved by an unaided mortal. It doesn't say who decreed it, but apparently that's the rules that we have to follow. Aphrodite blames herself as the mother of Ares' sons, but then Demeter tells her that, quote, everything is ready. There is no more time, so they must all go to Hades to enter an ark that will take them to oblivion. At Hanscom Air Force Base, Lieutenant Candy is snooping around a darkened office, looking up files on Steve Trevor. She finds a reference to Project Ares and takes photos of the paperwork with a sub-miniature camera. As she leaves the building, she sees a TV news report on a glowing orb flying around Boston, leaving a trail of decayed trees and crumbling buildings in its wake. We cut away from the TV and see that the orb is actually Decay, using her decomposition breath to wreak havoc. She destroys the base of the Boston Massacre Monument, causing the pillar to fall towards some innocent bystanders. At the last second, Wonder Woman catches the monolith and hurls it back at the Medusa's daughter, who easily reduces it to dust. News cameras watch as the two hurl threats at each other in ancient Greek, and cliché lovers need not fear, as there is the requisite, "What are they saying? I don't know, it's all Greek to me," joke from the assembled onlookers. Wonder Woman grapples with Decay, her skin getting more and more wrinkled the weaker she gets, until Decay's taunt about her being returned to earth and dust reminds the Amazon that her lasso was made from the girdle of Gaia, mother of the earth, and is constantly renewed like Gaia constantly renews the earth. This makes it immune to Decay's power, so Wonder Woman gets the loop around Decay's neck, pouring life into the creature of death until it consumes her in a large explosion. Wonder Woman retrieves her tiara from the ashes, but then she's alerted to danger by her bracelets glowing and making a whump-whump noise, something she calls the flashing thunder. Suddenly she's surrounded by reporters, asking her 1,000 questions in a language she doesn't understand. Confused, she flies off to find Julia. In Ares' netherworld, Deimos is berating Phobos for his thoughtlessness. He says his brother risked ruining their father's plans, but Ares has decided he still has need of him, so he will live. This time. At the offices of the Boston Globe leader, city editor Carol Bennett is excited for the chance to claim this new superhero for her newspaper, the same way the Daily Planet attached itself to Superman. Noticing the bird-like symbol on the hero's chest, she notes that Bird Woman doesn't fit and Hawk Woman is already taken, but the emblem also looks like a double W. Since Superman has an S on his chest, she decides to take inspiration from this emblem. The next morning, the headline of the Boston Globe leader proclaims, in a large typeface, Wonder Woman. North of Boston, a car winds its way up a forested mountain to a secluded house. Etta enters with a sack of groceries to find Steve staring amazed at the TV. He says the woman on the news report is the angel who saved him from the crash. He'd thought she was a hallucination, but now that he knows she's real, he has to find her, as she can tell him what happened. The two leave the house, unaware they are being watched by a stern-looking man in a military uniform. At Mercy General Hospital, a doctor tells Julia Capitellis that Vanessa's artificial aging process is now in remission, but they can't find a cure as they don't know what caused it. Julia finds a place to sit alone and cry, but then hears someone calling her name from the stairwell. There she finds Wonder Woman and asks if she's found a cure for her daughter. The Amazon holds up Harmonia's talisman, and Julia says it's created some kind of psychic bond between them? I'm not entirely sure how an archaeologist has figured this out, but okay. The professor says she may not fully understand what's going on, but since her daughter was attacked, this is now her fight as well. The two women go to the Capitellis' winter home in the country to study the amulet. Julia pores over her books, trying to identify the markings, while Diana watches out a window. She sees a shadowy figure skulking around the house and sneaks out to investigate. She lassos the gun out of the man's hand, but then they both recognize each other at the same moment. It's Steve Trevor, and he asks for Wonder Woman's help. Julia comes out, shotgun in hand, saying she recognizes the now infamous Colonel from the news. He says Wonder Woman saved him when a monster crashed his plane, and Julia comments that as crazy as that sounds, it fits with everything else strange that's been going on. Diana asks why she should trust Steve, and he says because his life depends on it. They're interrupted by Etta Candy crying out, and Steve rushes to where he left her, followed closely by Diana. Climbing over a rise, they find Colonel Michaelis holding a gun, crouched over Etta's slumped, unconscious body. One thing, before we get too far, I did forget last episode to mention that Decay claims to be the daughter of Medusa. Medusa, of course, was the Gorgon who had snakes for hair, and anyone who looked at her was turned to stone. I'm not sure if that means that when Phobos scooped that blob out of the heart of that giant corpse, that was actually Medusa's corpse. I don't think in the original mythology that Medusa had a daughter. I know when the hero Perseus chopped off her head, there came out a golden sword-wielding giant and the winged horse Pegasus. But as far as I can tell, Decay is an original character. But she keeps bringing up that that's who her mother was, so okay then. I'm really intrigued by this bit with the gods, where they're talking about having to go into an ark that will take them to oblivion. I don't know if that's some kind of way to save them from the wrath of Ares in case Diana fails, or what that's about, but I'm sure we'll find out in future issues. One part that I really liked was when Etta was snooping around the office. When I was a kid, I was really into spies. I read a bunch of books about how real-world, Cold War spies operated and the equipment they used and stuff. I even dragged my mother to the International Spy Museum when we were on a trip to DC. So seeing Etta pull out one of those old-school sub-miniature spy cams was a really cool, kind of nostalgic moment. Whereas today, she'd just snap a few pictures with her smartphone. This issue has a lot of old-school elements that I personally really like. There's narration boxes and thought bubbles, and in addition to just fighting, Diana and Decay are kind of having a debate as they're battling. There's a lot of fun little asides from people in the crowd. For instance, at one point, someone says, "Who is that?" "Well, it sure ain't Superman." And "What's going on? Are they shooting a movie here?" The bit where Diana's lasso just happens to be the perfect weapon to destroy Decay seemed a tiny bit too convenient. But you gotta remember, she's new to this whole hero thing, so there's gonna be a learning curve. One bit that got me a little confused was when her silver bracelet started glowing, and she called it the Flashing Thunder. That was the name for the post-crisis version of bullets and bracelets. But this almost is like it's almost like Spider-Man's Spidey sense, warning her of danger. But it ended up just being a huge crowd of reporters trying to interview her. And one part that I liked was when she's just caught in this crowd and she's just like, "Nope, this is too many people, I am getting out," and she just flies away. I know, I wish I could do that when I'm stuck in a huge crowd and feeling claustrophobic. Phobos' punishment for risking ruining Ares' plans was to be thrown into a fountain of bile, which is just really, really nasty. I'm getting flashbacks to the Bog of Eternal Stench from Labyrinth. I really liked the bit with the newspaper editor, going all, the Daily Planet has Superman, we need to latch on to this superhero, but we gotta give her a cool name. What's a cool name? Oh, Wonder Woman, that works. They do mention that the symbol on her costume looks a bit like a bird and a double W. I know originally in the 40s, Wonder Woman's costume had a golden eagle on it, and it stayed that way until, from what I can tell, the early 80s, when apparently they wanted to get a better trademark on Wonder Woman, so she needed her own symbol. and they came up with the kind of double W look, which was apparently easier to trademark, a lot like the Superman S. I know since then, artists have tried to kind of merge the two symbols, and you can see that even in the modern movie costume, where it's both a bird and kind of the WW symbol. And they'll add like a bird head to the top of the middle point, and the sides become wings. This one, there's no bird head, but the arms of the W kind of look like pinion feathers. I liked the callback to the Golden Age with Steve calling Wonder Woman an angel. That seemed to be 1940s Steve's favorite word to describe her, so that was cool that they brought that back. The bit with Julia saying that the amulet had created a psychic bond, that part I wasn't sure about. Wonder Woman doesn't actually talk in these scenes, which I thought was a little strange, because there's angle brackets around Julia's words in her speech bubbles, which in comics is usually used to indicate that someone is speaking in a foreign language. So presumably she's speaking Ancient Greek, and Wonder Woman should be able to understand her? Unless they're saying that her dialect of Ancient Greek is different than the one that Wonder Woman speaks, and the amulet was translating for them? Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. They ended this issue on a great cliffhanger. Here we have Colonel McCallus, who we've been told is Steve's best friend, and it turns out he's been spying on them, and he's crouched over Etta with a gun, and we can't tell if she's even alive, so you're thinking, wait, is he a secret servant of Ares too, just like Slade and General Tolliver? Who knows? Well, okay, I know, because I flipped ahead a few pages, but you'll have to wait till next episode to find out. Or, go to your local comic shop or library and look up the next issue. So I really liked this comic. She has her first real battle with the villain, and she gets her superhero name, and it ends with just a really compelling cliffhanger. I thought it was pretty amazing, so let's give it a full 5 stars. Okay, next up we have Wonder Woman Volume 4, Issue 4, Blood. The cover date is February 2012. Executive editor was Eddie Berganza. Cover artist, penciler, and inker was Cliff Chang. Writer was Brian Azzarello. Colorist was Matthew Wilson. Letters was Jared K. Fletcher. And the editors were Matt Idelson and Chris Conroy. And I'm reading this from Wonder Woman Volume 1, Blood. We start in Darfur, where smoke and gunfire fill the air and bodies litter the streets. Apollo enters a bar filled with corpses lying in pools of blood, where the only living occupant is a bald white man with pure black eyes drinking at the bar, wearing blood-spattered clothes and a long white goatee. This man greets Apollo as his brother, and the sun god calls him War and says he's concerned for him. In a London nightclub, Wonder Woman is wearing street clothes, standing in a crowd and listening to the band. Hermes, half disguised under a poncho, beanie, and sunglasses, sits at a table with Zola, and confides in her that he's worried about Wonder Woman. After her reaction to learning the truth about her parentage, he finds it odd that she seems to be celebrating. Zola says she's not celebrating, she's sharing in the community of people who like that music. Strife, champagne bottle in hand, goes up to Wonder Woman to share a drink. The Amazon is annoyed, but Strife tells her that in the Olympian family, everyone is against everyone else, and pouring them each a drink, tries to raise a toast to family. On Paradise Island, Hera appears during a raging thunderstorm. Dessa wants to send the guards, but Hippolyta refuses. Arming herself with a battle axe, she declares she will face Hera alone, queen to queen. Strife glares at a broken champagne flute, the result of her trying to toast with the angry Wonder Woman. Hermes warns her not to mess with Wonder Woman, but Strife says she was trying to be sympathetic. The messenger of the gods scoffs at the idea, and warns that Hera will have her pound of flesh. Strife implies they should give her Zola's unborn child by placing her hand on the mortal woman's abdomen. Wonder Woman grabs her wrist, slamming her hand on the table and stabbing it with the broken champagne glass. She says that pound of their family's flesh is hers to protect, and that Strife has shown her what family means to the Olympians. Pulling her bleeding hand off the table, Strife promises she won't help Wonder Woman again. But as she walks out of the nightclub, she turns back to say that one day the Amazon will beg her for help. Hippolyta bows her head respectfully in the presence of Hera. She says it was never her intent to offend the goddess, and that all she did was to protect her daughter. Hera explodes in rage, saying it's her husband's daughter, then in a much quieter voice points out that while she is a goddess, she is also a woman, and how could Hippolyta do that to another woman? There is an actually touching bit where the Queen of the Gods asks what Zeus did to make Hippolyta love him, and what she could do to make him love her, but it's interrupted by the appearance of the rest of the Amazons, armed to the teeth and saying they will protect their queen to the death. Though they've disobeyed her, Hera says Hippolyta should be proud of her subjects' loyalty. The Amazon Queen states that after losing her daughter and Hera's faith in her, she's anything but proud. She hands the goddess her battle axe and bows to the ground, asking for forgiveness. Hera raises the axe over her head as the Amazons aim their bows, but then she lowers it and crouches to hug Hippolyta and whisper in her ear that she wishes she could. In Wonder Woman's apartment, Zola enters Wonder Woman's room to thank her for the fun evening. They both sit on the bed and Zola says how she can't go home, not that it ever felt like home. She's never really had much family, so where she lived was only ever just her house. Wonder Woman talks about how one of the reasons she left Paradise Island was because she thought that being sculpted from clay meant that she was different from her sisters and didn't belong. Wonder Woman thinks for a moment, then, now in her full costume, goes to Hermes to borrow his caduceus, the magic staff with two snakes wrapped around a pole that is traditionally used by the Messenger of the Gods. With it, she teleports back to Paradise Island, which seems deserted. She enters the city square to find hundreds of snakes, slithering through scattered weapons and pieces of armor. The princess gives out a startled "No," then starts apologizing to her mother as she walks through the sea of serpents. She says she's always wished she was her mother's biological daughter, and now she is, but it's too late. She falls to her knees, weeping, and hugs Hippolyta, who's still kneeling on the ground in supplication, her whole body turned to stone. Back in Darfur, Apollo tells War that their father has gone missing, and that according to the sun god's oracles, he doesn't exist. War asks if he's been murdered, and Apollo states that only a blood relative could be powerful enough. War says he couldn't be bothered to kill Zeus, but Apollo points out that the other gods will suspect him, and that he could use an ally. War wonders if it's actually Apollo who needs an ally, as this is a prime opportunity for the sun god to become king. Apollo is welcome to try, but War will not be getting involved. But when Apollo asks for his word, War gets up and leaves the bar, refusing to promise anything and pointing out that their fate has always been in mortal hands, so it's inevitable that the world will be ruled by War. So this old, world-weary version of War is apparently the New 52 version of Ares, and the change is interesting. Ares is traditionally portrayed as an evil, aggressive figure in modern retellings of the Greek myths, even though he wasn't originally intended to be that way. So this is definitely a unique take on the character. Ordinarily, if she was in street clothes, I would be calling Wonder Woman Diana, but since at the end of the last issue she said she's not Diana or Clay anymore, she's just Wonder Woman, that's what I called her in my recap. Although she is technically in street clothes, she's wearing a white-ribbed tank top and what looks like a leather vest and pants, but she's still got her Wonder Woman bracers and necklace and armband on, so if somebody, actually paid attention, they could probably tell, hey, isn't that Wonder Woman's necklace? Oh, hey, look at your in no way disguised face, you're Wonder Woman! I'm not sure what to think of Strife, exactly. Sometimes she seems like she's being genuine when she says she wants to be helpful, but it seems like all she's done since she got there is cause a whole bunch of chaos and infighting. But then again, her name is literally Strife, so it's very possible that her only reason to be there is to stir up controversy. There's just a moment, it's like literally one or two panels, where Hera isn't just the jealous, spurned wife, but she's this woman who's genuinely sad that her husband keeps being unfaithful to her. And Cliff Chang's art is just great. You can see the the expression on her face change to sorrow, and then as soon as the Amazons show up, she's all wrathful vengeance again. Even at this dramatic moment when she's got the axe high over her head and you think she's just gonna bring it down right on Hippolyta's head, and then she just drops it and bends down and hugs her. You can tell that she genuinely does not want to do this, but she has to, because as Queen of the Gods, she can't allow anyone to defy her. The one part that I had a bit of a problem with was when Wonder Woman was saying that she felt different from her sisters because she thought she'd been sculpted from clay. In the 40s and 80s, they talk about her childhood as being wonderful, that she was taught by all these wise women and always felt loved. So switching that up here in the New 52 to make it so that she felt like an outsider, I'm not sure I like that change. The turning of the Amazons into a bunch of snakes and Hippolyta into a stone statue obviously has implications of Medusa with her snake hair and turning people to stone. It's interesting that it was Hera who did this, when in the original myths it was Athena who turned the beautiful Medusa into a horrible monster. This issue actually has a bit that clarifies a thing from issue 1. Apparently, Apollo's oracles decided to play the pronoun game, and I lost, because when they said that he doesn't exist yet, I thought they were talking about the child of Zeus who was going to defeat a sibling, but apparently they were talking about Zeus himself. And yeah, if the King of the Gods is missing, that is definitely a bad thing. Zeus may not be the nicest or the most competent deity in the Greek myths, but he's definitely the one who is controlling the power. And without him, there's going to be a huge battle to claim the throne. So this was a pretty good issue. Let's give it 3 stars. Okay, moving on to the TV show. We have Wonder Woman Season 1, Episode 3, Beauty on Parade. The air date was October 13, 1976, starring Linda Carter and Lyle Waggoner. Lola Flynn was played by Anne Francis. Monty Burns was played by Bobby Van. Jack Wood was played by Dick Van Patten. And Rita was played by Krista Helm. The episode starts with a bomb attack on a truck carrying parts for a new radar scanner to Fort Russell. No one is hurt, but the tunnel to the fort is damaged. At the War Department, General Blankenship tells Steve and Diana that this is the 3rd such perfectly timed attack on radar parts. The Major and his secretary go to the fort to investigate, where they meet the commander of the base. He says there's no chance of the attacks being an inside job, as everyone on the base has been thoroughly screened by the military. Steve and Diana notice a group of civilian women, contestants in the Miss G.I. Dream Girl beauty pageant. They question whether the women have been cleared as well, and the commander says that they, and the pageant's host, famous radio personality Jack Wood, have been at several other bases to boost troop morale. The places he names just happen to coincide with the other radar scanner attacks, so Diana suggests to Steve that they plant an agent inside the pageant. She offers to do it, but Steve says, without malice, that thanks, but they need a really amazing girl who looks great in a swimsuit. Diana says that if she's no longer needed, she'll return to Washington, but actually disguises herself in a wig and dress, and visits the contestants' dance rehearsal, calling herself Diana Paradise. She convinces Jack and the dance instructor, a middle-aged former pageant winner named Lola, to allow her to join, though the pianist Monty is hesitant. One contestant named Rita is also bitter at the late entry, and warns Diana to stay out of her way. As Steve leaves the base, he realizes his car is being followed. His pursuers force him off the road, but when they try to drive off, Wonder Woman shows up and pulls Jessica Jones, or I guess technically it was Jessica Jones who pulled a Wonder Woman, and lifts up the back end of the car off the ground so they can't leave. The men inside start to flee on foot, but Wonder Woman catches them in her golden lasso. The Major, who is unharmed, asks who gave them their orders, but they say they were paid anonymously to take out Steve Trevor. Wonder Woman uses her strength to push Trevor's car back on the road, and he takes the hired muscle to the police. Back at the base, Monty the pianist gets off the phone and tells Lola that his suspicions were correct. There's no one on the base named Diana Paradise. The dance instructor is unfazed, saying she lied about her identity when she was starting out, but Monty says that it'll be too bad if Diana is interested in more than the contest. Steve returns to the War Department to find Diana in her pageant disguise, practicing her poise. He's astonished at her transformation, but she tells him how she's infiltrated the contest, and he agrees that her plan is a good one. He says if he needs to contact her, he'll call, pretending to be her Uncle George. There's a tense moment when he says that seeing her in a dress reminds him of someone, but he turns out to be teasing when he says she looks like Joan Crawford. At least her ankles do, anyway. Yeah, insert rim shot sound effect here. Once Diana's at the dorm housing the pageant girls, a nervous Lola warns her to be extra careful. Jack Wood pays a visit and, impressed with Diana, decides she'll be his assistant in his magic act. After he leaves, Rita is jealous, saying the role had been hers, but her attempted fight is broken up by Lola telling Diana that she's got a call from her Uncle George. She'll allow it this once, but personal calls are against the rules. Steve tells Diana that the attack on the base was actually the second attempt to destroy the radar scanner parts, but the first only destroyed an access road and was deemed an accident. The last component will be assembled at 1 a.m. near the fort's electrical substation. He'll be there to stop the inevitable attack, but Diana should watch the pageant group for signs of the saboteur. That night, while all the other girls sleep, Diana arranges her pillows and wig to look like she's still in bed, then spins into her costume and heads to the substation. By the time she arrives, Steve has already been knocked unconscious, and his masked attacker has planted a bomb in some electrical equipment. Wonder Woman saves him from the blast, telling him when he awakens that the radar parts were unharmed. She returns to the dorm where her wig and empty bed have been found by Rita, but she pretends to have been taking a shower, so she's not disqualified for taking off without permission. Lola orders the girls back to bed, but then is confronted by Steve's masked attacker, who reveals himself to be Monty. He's still suspicious of Diana, but Lola says she wants nothing to do with the attacks. Monty informs Lola that the radar scanner was never their real target, but instead their true goal is to take out a general who will soon be visiting the base, Dwight D. Eisenhower. We get a quick scene in Texas where we learn the sabotages have changed General Eisenhower's route to Fort Russell, then go back to Major Trevor in Washington. He learns from General Blankenship that the radar scanner has been completed in time for Eisenhower's inspection, but Steve wonders why someone skilled enough to infiltrate the base missed destroying the parts 3 times. He learns the general's route to the base from Blankenship, and realizes all the sabotage attempts have actually made it so Eisenhower can only take one easily ambushed road. As he rushes off to stop the general before he reaches the trap, Steve orders Etta to call Diana, but when she does, Monty hangs up on her. She radios the major, who tells her to go to the fort and warn his secretary in person. At the pageant dress rehearsal, Rita complains that Diana's magician's assistant costume ought to have been hers. Monty still thinks Diana is up to no good, and watches the heavy stage lights and speakers being lowered via pulley, taking note which rope holds it up. Lola sees what he's thinking and wants to stop him, but he says it's too late and his men are already in position. We see camouflaged soldiers take out the guards at the gate Eisenhower will have to pass through and set up their trap. Steve and Blankenship are too late to meet the general's plane at the runway, so they rush off to Fort Russell. Etta arrives after the start of the pageant, but isn't allowed to talk to Diana. Backstage, the Amazon tells Lola that her costume for the magic show is missing. Rita is instantly suspected, and sure enough they watch as she waltzes out on stage, wearing the costume and usurping Diana's part in the act. Lola tries to stop Monty, but he traps her in a magician's disappearing box, unaware that the girl on stage is not his target. Diana sees him cutting the rope, quickly spins into her costume, and catches the heavy equipment before it can do any harm. Monty escapes in a jeep, but as she goes to chase him, Wonder Woman finds Etta, who tells her of the plot to attack Eisenhower. The general's car approaches the ambush point, closely followed by Steve. They try to escape their tail, but the major honks his name in Morse code, convincing them to stop. Steve tells Eisenhower of the ambush, but unfortunately they've already gone too far, and their attackers block the road behind them by knocking over a telephone pole, then open fire on the army men. Wonder Woman arrives, picking up the downed pole and lobbing it at the gunmen, sending them scattering. Monty arrives and tries shooting a rocket launcher at them, but Wonder Woman catches the missile and throws it away to explode harmlessly. The saboteur then tries to escape, but he's stopped by a quick toss of Wonder Woman's lasso. Back at the pageant, Jack Wood explains to the audience everything that's happened, then declares Wonder Woman the contest winner. She's given the traditional bouquet of roses, but starts handing them out to the other contestants. Etta and Steve watch from backstage, and Etta wonders where Diana went. Steve says she must have given up after learning she'd be sharing the stage with the beautiful Wonder Woman. The episode wraps up back in Steve's office as he tells Diana that Monty and his gang have been arraigned, the radar scanner is working great, and Eisenhower has nominated Wonder Woman for a special citation. Diana says she feels sorry for Lola, and Steve mentions that Jack Wood is trying to get the dance instructor leniency for cooperating with the authorities. Etta is amazed that Diana can still focus on office work after everything that's happened, and Steve jokes that she's all business. He says he hopes to be there when Diana finally decides to have some fun, and she promises he will be. So, I'll be honest, I don't know much about beauty pageants, but I suspect they wouldn't let someone who just shows up off the street into the finale of the contest, no matter how beautiful she is. I couldn't really find a way to mention it in the recap, but there was this really great scene where Lola talked about being a former pageant winner and how, now that she's older, she feels like she's losing her beauty, and how the high point of her life is when she was 19. And Diana talks about how a woman's beauty shouldn't be defined by her age. And I really liked that, because the thought that the high point in your life is when you were 19 and everything else after that is just going to be downhill is just really sad. So I love that Diana was arguing against that idea. Lola was played by Anne Francis, who's best known for the classic movie Forbidden Planet, which is a 1950s sci-fi take on Shakespeare's The Tempest. Jack Wood was played by Dick Van Patten, who's, I think, most famous for the late 70s, early 80s show 8 is Enough. And I don't know, I'm guessing, I think he was supposed to be funny, or in the 70s that was a funny character, but by modern standards, he was just really skeevy. He was, like, constantly hitting on the girls, made jokes that weren't actually explicit, but were just really inappropriate for the host of this beauty pageant to be saying to the contestants. I should mention that all the previous episodes, the spin effect for changing into Wonder Woman's costume was shot in slow motion, whereas I believe from this one forward it's all normal speed. From what I can understand, the slow-mo effect just cost too much to keep doing on a regular basis, which is kind of funny when you think about it now, where, a kid could do a slow-motion fade effect with really basic video editing software. The way they talked, nobody recognized who Dwight Eisenhower was, and this episode was set in 1942, before he would have become General of the Army. Obviously, people watching the show in the 70s and us looking back know him as the, at that point, future 34th President of the United States. When Monty shot the rocket launcher at them, I thought that maybe Wonder Woman was going to block it with her bracelets, but it was pretty funny to see her just catch it out of the air like you would a frisbee. Then at the end, where Wonder Woman wins the beauty pageant, which, is kind of unfair seeing as she wasn't actually in the beauty pageant. I mean, I guess it makes sense since she had just saved the day, but technically she wasn't in the beauty pageant. Diana Paradise was in the beauty pageant, but nobody knew where Diana Paradise had gone. Still, I really liked that she took her bouquet and then just was giving the flowers to all the other contestants. Like I said, I don't know much about beauty pageants. The most I would know is from watching Miss Congeniality. So I'm not sure if that's a normal thing that they do, but I thought that was a really great sign of respect to all the women who had, actually gone through all the work of being in the pageant. Kind of reminded me of, was it last year when the guy read the wrong name for, was it Miss Universe? He said it was the one lady and it turned out that he'd read it wrong. It was actually the other, and they ended up taking the crown off and putting it on the real winner. Part of me wished that she had then taken that crown and, broken it in half, Mean Girl style, and handed half to the other woman. Though, obviously, in that moment, the woman was just in complete shock and wouldn't have thought to do that. Plus, I'm guessing that crown was actual metal and would have been kind of difficult to just snap in half. So, I really liked this episode. Let's give it 4 stars. Okay, last is news, and boy howdy do we have a lot of it. July 21st to 24th was San Diego Comic-Con, and we got all of the news. I am just going to basically list it, and you can go to the show notes on WonderWomanWarriorForPeace.wordpress.com and check the links yourself. First, we have official United States Postal Service Wonder Woman stamps to celebrate the 75th anniversary. There are 4 separate designs. You've got New 52 Wonder Woman, Bronze Age Wonder Woman, Silver Age Wonder Woman, and Golden Age Wonder Woman. Moving on to stuff that was explicitly revealed at Comic-Con, we have the first real poster for the movie, which is Wonder Woman in kind of a profile silhouette with this fiery background, and her costume is really colorful, and it looks amazing. Next, we have the first real trailer we have for this movie. It was released at Comic-Con, and the trailer is amazing. You see Steve Trevor washed up on the beach, and Wonder Woman discovers him, and she returns with him to Man's World. And there's a bunch of awesome shots of the Amazons fighting with soldiers on the beach. And you get to see Wonder Woman in a lot of action, and her costume is really nice and colorful against the gray-brown blueness of the trenches. You get to see her fighting with a lasso, which is awesome. And there is a hilarious bit at the end with Etta Candy. If you followed the podcast on Twitter, Wonder Woman WFP, you would have seen the poster and the trailer tweeted. Wonder Woman was also featured in the trailer that they released for the Justice League movie, but you don't see too much of her. It's mostly her sitting around talking to Batman. The trailer is more focused on introducing Aquaman and the Flash. There's also footage of 2 separate panels from Comic-Con. There is the Wonder Woman 75th anniversary panel, and there is the Wonder Woman movie panel that has the director, Patty Jenkins, and Gal Gadot, and Chris Pine, and Connie Nielsen. We also got a TV spot, which is basically the trailer cut down to only be a minute long, but it's still worth checking out. The last thing I want to talk about is that there is officially yet another Wonder Woman podcast, or, well, more of a revival. The Diana Prince Wonder Woman podcast had 2 episodes, hadn't posted a new episode in 7 months, and now it's back. That podcast is run by a guy named Diablo Frank. Definitely go check it out. His latest episode had some really great points about Wonder Woman's history as a peacemaker who is still a part of the military. It's great to see other fans of Wonder Woman in the podcasting sphere, although I am a little bit disappointed that not only am I no longer the only Wonder Woman podcast, I'm also no longer the longest running Wonder Woman podcast, since Diablo posted his first episode back in June of 2015. But hey, I am still the only one run by a chick, and that's a big deal. That said, if Felicia Day comes out with her own Wonder Woman podcast next month, I will be throwing in the towel. Okay, so that's it for this episode. If you have any questions, comments, complaints, concerns, conundrums, or queries, you can email me at wonderwomanwarriorforpeace@gmail.com. Let me know if you're okay with your message being read on the podcast. The main podcast website is wonderwomanwarriorforpeace.wordpress.com. You can check out the show notes there. You can look the show up on Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr, and Instagram under Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace, and on Twitter and Pinterest as Wonder Woman WFP. The intro music was Wonder Woman Theme, the Best Themysciran Symphony Dialogue Dance Mix by Taz Damien Devil. You can watch the full video on his YouTube channel. The outro music is Wonder by the Double Clicks, and you can find them on their website at thedoubleclicks.com. Next episode, I will be reviewing Sensation Comics Volume 1, Issue 4, Wonder Woman Volume 2, Issue 5, Wonder Woman Volume 4, Issue 5, and Wonder Woman Season 1, Episode 4. But until then, remember, sisters, hopes may fade, but wonders never cease.
'Cause you're not a quitter, you still believe the truth's in your lasso, your heart's on your sleeve, and when we're drowning in darkness, you'll save us all from going